Welcome, lovelies, to Hello, It's Better to Talk. Today we're going to be talking about something quite specific, about older women from the silent generation who may have suffered a miscarriage. I've been doing some work with this recently with Saga magazine, and it was something that happened to my mum, and I think it's something that's happened to a lot of women out there. So today's episode is all about having suffered a miscarriage or baby loss in the past and never talked about it, and what you can do to help. Hello, my name's Helen Garlick. For 35 years I was a family lawyer and mediator, but I kept secret what was happening in my own family of origin. Now I know it's time to talk about it, so I'd like to warmly welcome you to Hello, It's Better to Talk. So in today's episode of Hello, It's Better to Talk, we're going to be talking about something very specific, about older women from the silent generation who may have suffered a miscarriage or baby loss. Now, the silent generation is a generation which is sandwiched between what was called in the UK and America the greatest generation and then the baby boomers. And very broadly, it's to do with people who were born in the mid to late 1920s up to 1945. That's how the silent generation is defined. They were born in a time of crisis. There was the Depression going on in the 30s. The First World War had only just finished in 1918. We were coming up to the Second World War in 1939 to 1945. So there were actually fewer people born in that time. The ravages of the First World War meant that there weren't so many babies being born. Such a huge tragic loss of soldiers who'd gone to the war. And those who were born were obviously very precious, but they were probably, looking back on it, dealing with the trauma and the after effects of war, which echo on in the generations. There are certain traits about the silent generation which I think it's useful to talk about, and people talk about them being quite cautious, actually quite silent. That's why they're called the silent generation. So they would have heard as they're growing up lots of things like it's better, children should be seen and not heard, or let's draw a veil over that, or what else might they have heard, that if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. So they were very much culturally told not to talk. They were also quite traditional, hardworking, respectful. These are all adjectives which are very commonly used for the silent generation, one of whom was my mum, who was born in 1931. And that lived through the Second World War as a child. And she was taught very much that it was better to stay quiet about things, better to keep silent. Now, my mum in the 1960s had a miscarriage, which must have been when the baby would have been about 15 weeks old, because I can remember very clearly that she and my dad had talked to us about how they were going to have a brother, how we were going to have a brother or a sister, they were going to have a baby. And I was a bit worried about it in my 8-year-old way, because I knew that my mum had rhesus negative blood and my dad had rhesus positive blood. And they'd been told by the doctors that it would be okay for their first child. The first child would be born safely, that was me. Pretty much okay for a second child, but that they shouldn't have any more children after that. But nonetheless, they did try for a third child. And I can remember as a child waking up in the middle of the night to my mother screaming and then going into her bedroom transfixed to see there was blood. There's my father looking like he didn't really know what to do. So I suggested that you call the doctor. They called the doctor came, and I was kind of bundled out of the room, but I could still hear my mum in pain, crying. And so it was quite scary for me as a child. My brother David and I talked a bit about it, but we felt really quite alone. And my mum later said, well, it's happened, let's draw a veil over it. I don't want to talk about it. I've got the two of you, but you would have had a little sister. So I always knew that there was a little sister there, and that, in a way, that was part of my family, but it was nothing that we ever, she wasn't somebody that we ever talked about. It was another thing that we were silent about. Now, people nowadays are much more open. Chrissy Teigen and Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, have recently had miscarriages and have talked about it. And the issue was covered in one of the soaps, I think it was Coronation Street, and then that led to a lot of older women contacting the two organisations, Tommy's and Sands, to say that this had happened to them a long, long time ago and they'd never spoken about it, but that they wanted to now. I'm not saying that if you're in this position, or if your mother's in this position, or somebody that you know is in this position, you should talk about it, you must talk about it. I'm in a baby boomer generation, not the silent generation. I didn't have quite as many, cultural kind of things about I've got to keep silent, although I did have quite a lot. But I know that there are benefits of talking. Talking is a great healer, finding a safe space, somebody that you can talk about something difficult with, and talking just helps. It kind of eases things. It puts labels on things. It starts helping you to make sense of things. I have a worry as well that if you don't talk about stuff, and this is something that came up with two people who help women who've suffered miscarriages, and they said if you don't talk about it, there is a risk that it can impact on your relationships, it can impact on even your physical health. You can have illness because you're holding something inside which is corrosive. Secrets can be really corrosive. That's certainly what I found in my life. So the question is, what have you got to lose by talking about it? What have you got to gain? Looking at the mirror image of that, what have you got to gain by talking about it? If you feel that there is more to lose than to gain, then you probably won't talk about it. But I just really want to send out a message that no one needs to feel that there's a stigma about baby loss. 1 in 4 women we know suffer a miscarriage or baby loss. It is an intensely terrible, private, sometimes tragic thing to lose, because it's not just about the physical thing that you're going through, it's also the future that you and maybe your partner too were building about a baby. It's affected women in so many different ways. So I'd encourage you to talk. Tommy's and Sands both have support groups that you can talk to, and just gently start the process of putting things in place, unravelling what happened to you in the past, being heard. If you've suffered a hurt, it's important that that's acknowledged for me, but I think for you too, and that you are heard about your loss. It will also help it ease it. It may be a bit more painful as you're talking about it initially, but over time that eases. So naming something, labelling it, helps us deal with it as human beings on the planet. So I'd encourage you to have the courage to be vulnerable and to talk about this subject, which may be very painful to you, but there are the charities, Tommy's and Sands. There may be a friend or relative that you could talk to, and you feel that it is time to talk. Because talking helps. Talking eases the pain. When you put labels on things, when you share what those feelings were, it eases that pain. So I encourage you to talk. And also, for everyone out there, just wanting to send you love and light, and would love to see you next week for our next episode of Hello, It's Better to Talk. And if you hit the subscribe button, then you'll be notified automatically when the next episode is coming up. So please do that.